Hello everyone. In this video, we're going to be creating a web application in Python only. The web application we're going to be creating today is the one that you're seeing right now, where it's just a basic sales dashboard. We have a chart, two charts that are displaying some data that you can filter on according to dates and according to category. It's a very simple application. This can be applied to any data project. Also, we have some more advanced features. We have a second page, so it's multi-page. You can log out and log in as another user. And this other user has a bit less permissions. Here I kept it simple, so he just doesn't see the table here. And this application is deployed. So really the goal here is to show you the whole package, how we start from nothing and we get an application like this that displays the results of your data project. Maybe some context on why this tutorial can be useful. I've been coding in Python for the last 6 years. What I find is in the Python world, generally we're really good when it comes to manipulating data or doing machine learning or whatever, or writing in scripts or in notebooks. Generally, what we're not good at is delivering a project. So we often just deliver a Jupyter notebook or a PDF with our results. And that's really not the best way to deliver something because your end user generally doesn't know Python and he doesn't want to run a Python script or just read a PDF. What we really want is to be able to interact with whatever you've done. And that's where web apps are really useful because you can create simple one-pagers where you just display the data you've parsed and you can interact with it. You can do a selection here and it updates some value. But using the tech that we're going to use, you can also create some much bigger applications where here we're interacting with an optimization models to place warehouses on a map to supply a demand, and we minimize the transportation cost, and the actual end user can actually choose the number of warehouses he wants as input to this optimization model, and he can see the results here and he can compare it to different runs. So yeah, the tech we're going to be using here really allows you to deliver your data project, whether it's a very simple one-pager or something more complex. In this tutorial, we're going to be focusing on a much easier example, so just this simple sales dashboard, but this should give you all the tools you need to move on to something much more complex. Big disclaimer, the tech we're using today is Taipy. I work at Taipy, which is why we're using Taipy. Just to give you some more context, Taipy, we're an open source Python library, so you can pip install Taipy. And this is basically the tech that allows us to create web applications in Python only. The reason I'm making this video is I've been working for 1.5 years at Taipy, and recently we've been getting a lot of new customers. So my bosses have tasked me with creating a course. And basically, the last 2 weeks I created this course and I taught it to some new customers. And it went really well, and that's why I thought, let's make this public, because this can actually be useful to not only our customers, new customers, but also anyone who just codes in Python. So that's why we're going to spend the next hour. It's 11 p.m. on a Friday, but this is fun, I think. So let's get started. I'm going to do this really step by step. The goal is really, regardless of your level in Python, you should be able to follow this somewhat. Maybe the basics. So yeah, I'm really going to go step by step. We're going to start with the basics of Taipy. We'll move on to visual elements. So how we display widgets, how we interact with those widgets on the page. We'll move on to styling. So how you actually get this proper styling with layouts and some CSS. I'm afraid. We'll move on to embedding charts like this one into applications. And then we'll talk about multi-page authentication, which we'll pass quickly on, and deployments as well. So let's get started. In the description, you'll find this GitHub link. I put all the contents of this course on GitHub so anyone can access it. If you want to code along, it should be pretty simple. Just open a new VS Code or whatever IDE you're using, create a terminal. Actually, let me go into a folder. Yeah, downloads is fine. I'll create a new folder in downloads just so I don't pollute. Taipy course. There we go. In here, open a terminal. We're gonna clone my repo, so git clone the link in my repo. There you go, this cloned the contents of my course right here. We're gonna open this folder, so we're in the right working directory. So I just open folder and I make sure that the root is here. And then you can create a new virtual environment. I use Venv personally, but you can use whatever you use generally. So I'm creating a new virtual environment. Takes a second. I'll activate it and then just install requirements and you should be good to go. So this step generally takes some time. I already have a setup that's already done, so I'll move on to the setup. But there we go. That's how you just set up the contents of this course. So once you've installed everything in your virtual environment, you should be able to just run the getting started, which is what we're going to start with. So we're really going to do things one step at a time. You'll notice this is the final result that we want. And here we're just starting with the basics, getting started. So for each step, generally I'll just show you the result that we want. I'll comment on the code and then I'll write the code so you can write along and we'll make sure that this works out. So as I said, Taipy, we're a Python library. You can pip install Taipy. Here we already did that when we installed the requirements. Here are the basics. So in this very short example, what we're doing is we're creating an application which doesn't have a lot. It has a title. It has a slider that's controlling a Python integer. And when we move the slider, we're updating the data within a chart, which is just this list of floats. And we're displaying it here in this chart. So very basic, very simple. If we look at the code, shouldn't be too hard. So this is the way we create pages within Taipy. We use this object, taipy.gui.builder. And if you want to create a page, you just do with tgp.page as page. The visual elements are always tgp.something, and you can find them in our docs. So if I go on Taipy docs, first you'll find a lot of important stuff here. The getting started is here, by the way. And for the visual elements, you just go to the visual element section and you'll find the docs for any visual elements that you need. So for example, the one we're using first is text. If you go to text, you'll find syntax of this specific element, and you'll find also some examples on how to format, how to use the properties that we give you. And there we go. So the first thing we're doing is we're creating a text, which is going to be this text. I do Taipy getting started, and I put a header marker, and I just put mode equals markdown so that Taipy can recognize the header marker and put this as a title instead of just some small text. The next part, I create a slider, tgp.slider. When you create a slider, generally you will have a slider or anything that's interactive, you'll have to connect it to a Python variable. So here I created an integer called value, which is just an integer, and I connect it to my slider like this. So I do value equals, and this might be the part that's a bit scary, but when you're using a dynamic element, you're connecting this to a Python variable that you'll want to change. The syntax is always quotes, brackets, the Python variable. So as soon as you have this, when you move the slider, it's going to change the value, Python integer, in the code. The next thing we want is a chart. So once again, if you have questions about charts, you can just go to Visual Elements, Chart, and you'll get a lot of examples, as well as how to embed Plotly figures into Taipy apps. I'll talk about this a bit later in the tutorial, but you'll have a lot of examples on how to create charts in Taipy. Here, what we're just doing is feeding some data, and the data is just going to be a list of floats. So here I created a function that just generates a list of floats, the weird sine function, cosine function, with a decay factor that is dependent on an input. I initialize the data like so. So data here is just a list of floats, and then I connect it to tgb.chart. Once again, when we're connecting a Python variable, we use this syntax. And the last thing I want is interaction. For interaction in Taipy, we use callbacks. So when you create the slider, you also want to create a function that tells Taipy, if someone touches that slider, what do you want us to do? And here, basically, I'm saying when someone touches the slider, I want to refresh data with some new data, which will be the results of this function, which takes in as an input the value that's changed by the slider. So basically, as soon as I touch the slider, this calls this function, which updates data, and finally updates the chart here. Very basic stuff. I went a bit slow here just to introduce all these new concepts. Now maybe we should just code this part together so you just get more insights on how this is done. So main2.py. Once again, we install Taipy. We're a Python library. You can just import us. So import taipy.gui.builder as TGB, which is what we use to create our visual elements widgets. And then from taipy.gui, import GUI. This is what we actually use to run the page. Yeah, I haven't said this, but here we just run the page like so. So we feed the page to a Taipy GUI, and then we just run it, and that serves your application on a local port. Let's start by creating the page. So with tgb.page as page, tgb.text, we'll start by creating a title. So once again, I'm putting a header, Taipy getting started. Let's just make something a bit more fun. Hello, YouTube. And we put mode equals MD for markdown, just so that it recognizes that this is a title and it makes it bigger and bolder. The next thing we want is the slider. So tgb.slider, value equals value. And I want to initialize this value integer to 10. So we can already run this page. Page equal page dot run. Let's just run this and see where this takes us. So I've got hello YouTube as a title, and I've got my slider that I can move around, which is controlling my value integer. Very basic, pretty fun. On each one of these visual elements, you'll have a lot of additional properties. So for example, min max, let's change that right here. So here the max is 100. If I want to change the max to 200, I can just rerun this. Also, we'll do use reloader equals true. This way we won't have to kill the terminal and relaunch it again. We'll only have to refresh the page when we do a change. So I'll give you an example here. So here the max has been changed to 200. If I change this to 250, I just save the file, make sure autosave is disabled here. I save the file. If I refresh the page, now I can push the slider to 250, which is the change I just made. There we go. Let's move on. So that's the slider, pretty cool. The next thing I want is tgv.chart, which takes in a list of float as data. So tgv.chart, I'll connect it to data, and I have to initialize the data. For now, let's just do this. And reload. And I get my chart with just a list of zeros, which is what I asked. I'll just copy paste this function. You can do the same since you've cloned the repo. I'll copy paste this function. I need to import costs and exp from math. From math, import cost exp. And the next thing, I want to initialize data. So compute data, value. There we go. And I can actually reload this. And I get my initial value. Pretty cool. We're almost done with this. The only thing that we're left is interactivity. Here the slider moves, it does nothing. We wanted to change the data here. How do we do this? Using a callback. So here I'm gonna create an onChange equals update chart. And I'll create def update chart. So the way we use callbacks, every callback needs a state variable as its input. And the state is basically what contains all the variables for a specific client. So when I want to update this, the data for the chart, I won't do data equals. I'm always going to do state the data, because the data we want to modify is not the data for all users. It's not the actual data object here. It's the data for the user that has requested this change. So it's whenever you update something in Taipy, in a callback, you'll always do state.data equals the new value. And here the new value is compute data, state.value. And once again, here we're not using value, which is something that's global, which is the actual Python variable. We use state.value because we want to take what the user has inputted uses the slider. And this should be fine. If we rerun this, this generally happens when you use reloader after changing backend stuff. It's not the best. Generally, use reloader will be better for front-end stuff, front-end modifications. And now we have what we needed, which is our slider and our chart that's updated. Maybe a bit more on state. What I said about this being very client-side. If I simulate, let's put that to 69, nice. If I simulate another user connecting to this page, you'll notice that his slider, so when I go into incognito, it's like I'm connecting as someone else, another IP. This new user has the value of 10, which is the initial value. He doesn't have the value of the other users, which makes sense. And also when you move that slider, it doesn't have an effect on the other clients. In more advanced Taipy stuff, you can communicate between users, you can send variables between users or messages. This won't be covered in this course, but you can feel free to look up the docs or ask for support on our website, and I'll be able to answer requests about this. So pretty cool. We have our very basic application, and that covers the getting started. All right, let's move on to visual elements. So now we'll start moving closer to the application that we actually want to build, which is this one, by introducing the data that we're going to use. So In the repo that you clone, there's a data.tsv, which contains a bunch of sales data. And the only thing that we're going to do in this part, we're going to read the data sets using pandas, and we're going to add 3 visual elements. We're just going to add a selector, so I can select a specific category. So in the dataset, it's a dataset about supermarket sales, and there's a category column, which has 3 unique values: furniture, office supplies, technology. We'll put in a chart, which will display the top 10 states and their sales, their respective sales, and a table to display the data. And the only interaction that we're going to add to this is when someone uses the selector, we want to filter both the chart and the table according to this. So if I press on office supplies, we filter the table for only office supplies rows, and we update the chart, the data in the chart, and the title here. So once again, very basic. Right now we're just starting. Keep in mind the application in the end is supposed to look like this. So you can see there's still a long way from just basic stuff to an application that's styled with multiple pages. But you gotta start somewhere. So let's get into this. Once again, do main2.py. And actually, we're just gonna look at the code for now, just so you get an idea. So this time, same thing here. We just import Taipy. We import pandas just to read this data.csv. I read the datasets, and there we go. If we take a look at the page, this time we have one new visual element, the selector, which is what allows us to select between a list of values. This takes in multiple properties. So the first one is selected category, which is the Python string that's going to change when you press on a new selected value. If I press on technology, selected category will be changed to the string technology. LOV, which is list of values. So this is a list that will contain the 3 values here: furniture, office supplies, technology. Pretty simple, just a list of possible values for your selector. And once again, a callback function. Here, the callback function will will filter this data according to category. It'll change the data displayed in this chart, and it'll change the title displayed here. So this is the selector, the chart, very basic. So we use a bar chart. This is the Python syntax to create charts. Once again, we'll cover later how to embed Plotly charts or any other charts, by the way, to Taipy apps. But if you use our default syntax, this is how it works. You link the chart to some data, pandas data frame. You declare the X and Y variables. You declare the type. So here we'll use a bar chart. And we use a layout dictionary for titles or whatever else in terms of styling. This is just to break line, so to give some space between the visual elements. I'll show you how it looks. And then just a table to display the data. So it's not that much compared to the getting started. We're just adding a selector, slightly more complex chart. And yeah, let's get into it. So let's go. I'll import taipy.gui.builder stgb. I'll import GUI. I'll import pandas. I'll read the dataset. And now we can start writing the page. So with tgb.page as page. Let's start by the selector, tgb.selector, value equals selected category. And we're going to initialize that value. So selected category, furniture, perfect. And then selector does not only have a value property, it also has a list of values property. So let's just create a categories list. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Categories equals, and this is pretty cool. So just we create a list of all the unique values in category, which is basically just furniture, office supplies, and technology. If you look at the list of values in category, well, here it's already filtered, but it has these 3 variables. We can actually just run this for now, just so you have an idea of what this looks like. And also I'll put dark mode equals false, because I want the app to be in white instead of blue. So let's run this, and I'll take a pit stop for water. So there we go, we get our selector with the list of values, which is what we want. And the initial selected value is furniture, because that's the value that we initialized. The next thing I want to do is add a chart. So tgb.chart. So the first thing chart needs is some data. So data equals, let's call it chart data. So keep in mind, chart data doesn't take in all of the data. It only takes the sales data for the top 10 states. So I have to do some parsing to get the data. So I'll do the parsing here, chart data equals, I'm gonna ask the Copilot for this because I don't wanna bother, get the sales data for the top 10 countries. This could work. Chart data equals, actually I don't even want this for now. Group by country sales, sum and largest 10. This could work. We can actually try this out. And also I'll do this. This doesn't work. Oh, I'm missing a few properties in chart. So when you do this, when you use the default syntax for chart, you need to specify a few things. So X, the X-axis, the Y-axis, and also the type. So we want a bar chart that has country as X, sales as Y, and yeah, it's a bar chart. And this takes in only data frames, so I'm gonna do something else. I'm gonna do this instead. So we're grouping by country, we're summing across the sales, we're sorting values, descending, we're keeping only the 10 first values, and we reset the index to make sure that we have both country and sales as columns. And this should work a bit better. I used Copilot for this, so can't be bothered. And this doesn't work, why? Give me a sec, I'll just debug using whatever I did before. Chart data, state, sales. Oh, there's no country, I think. Yeah, everything's in the US, so actually what I really want is state instead here. This should work a bit better. Yeah, sorry about that. There we go. Now we actually got sales by state, which is what we wanted in the start. Okay, pretty cool. One small difference with this is that I don't have a title and I don't have a y-axis. In the docs, we talk about how to add all of these to default type by charts. Once again, if you're using Plotly charts, you won't have to bother with this. But yeah, so basically to add titles or titles to the axis, we use a layout dictionary. The reason for this is that we use Plotly.js, JavaScript instead of Python for our default charts. This saves a lot of performance for us because we can directly control what data we send to our charts. And also we're running things on JS instead of Python. But that also means that you have to specify more properties using the Plotly docs sometimes. So for example here, if I want to add a title, I'm just going to do layout Yeah, like this. So I'm adding a title, sales by state, and I'm adding a title to the y-axis, which is revenue by USD. And to add the layout, all I have to do is layout equals. We'll put layout in quote and brackets because we want to be able to change this layout later. We want to be able to change the title, for example. If I run this, I get something a bit different. I get my title, I get my y-axis title. There we go. And the last thing I want to do is just tgb.chart equals, no, data, and I'll link this to just the data sets. And let's run this. And I did something wrong. I did chart. Guys, it's 20 to midnight right now, so don't expect a lot from me. On a Friday as well. And we get this table. You'll notice these two visual elements are a bit close, so I can just add tgb.html br to break a line, basically between those two elements. And there we go. I get the layout that I'm supposed to get in at the end of this part. Let me just remove all this. One last thing that we didn't do is interactivity. So right now the thing is very static. We want to be able to, when we click on the selector, to actually filter the data and make the changes in the chart and the table. So here I'll do onChange update data. Let's do that. So I'm creating a callback that basically tells Taipy, when someone touches this, I want you to run this function that we're going to create here. Update data state. Okay. There we go. And what do I want to do here? There's a few things that we want to do. We want to filter the data according to the category we selected. So state. Yeah, okay, Copilot is cheating because he has access to my main, which is the solution. I want to filter by category. So we filter the category using the selected category. We rerun the chart data. So basically we redo the filter that we did here, but this time using this filter data instead. And the last thing we do is we update the layout because we want to change the title. So state.layout, and we just change the title to sales by state for the selected category. And if we run this, please, okay, works fine. So when I change this to technology, for example, it filters the category to get technology only. It changed the data here to using only rows with the technology category, and then also change the title. So once again, right now, the app's not that impressive, but it actually works out, and right now everything's pretty simple. There we go, that's it for this part, and the next part is styling. So let's get right onto styling. So we're gonna do a big jump. So the application we just did is this one. And now what we're gonna do is this, which already looks a bit better, I would say. The way we do this is using styling. So unfortunately, this part is the worst part, especially for Python devs like me. Because we're really good at coding, we're really good at manipulating data, but doing anything that's slightly beautiful in the Python world, that's something impossible. And the reason for that is generally when you want to do styling, you're going to have to do some CSS. And unfortunately, some of these things won't require CSS, like layouts, but some of these will require CSS. For example, placing a button at a specific spot or changing colors, whatever. This unfortunately requires CSS, so we're going to be doing some CSS. I'm sorry, clickbait for saying only Python, but there's a bit of CSS. There's not that much, okay? It's just this. The question is, how do we get there? And also, what are we doing here? We're going to be styling this application this way. So there's a few things that appear on this app. There's layouts. So instead of having visual elements that take the whole page, we actually restrict them into parts. And we also divide the parts into columns. So for example, these visual elements only take 1/4 of this card instead of taking the whole space. We still have our chart here and our table, but instead here we're doing way more filters. So we're filtering by dates. It's a good way of introducing date visual elements. And we're also filtering by category and also by subcategory. This is a bit fun because it's a cascading filter. By that I mean here the list of values is this because we're in furniture, but if I change this to office supplies, it changes the list of value here. So slightly cool. And yeah, I can do technology accessories. I can change this to 2018. And if I click on apply, it just filters everything. Here, all the dates are 2018 and everything here is only technology accessories. All right. Quick comments on the code. I won't get too deep on the backend because we'll cover that when we're coding, and it's pretty simple anyways. Maybe more info on the styling. So let's do these one by one. The first thing I want to talk about is parts. So a good way to subdivide your application is to create parts. The first thing I created is a part. Class name is a way to apply classes to all your visual elements that are within a part. So when I say this specific part has class name container, I want to apply the styling of container to everyone here. These classes are either classes that you define in CSS yourself or classes that we have by default in Taipy. You can find default classes in the docs on each one of the visual elements. For example, if I take part, do we have container here? Should have, actually it might be, yeah, it's in StyleKit. So in StyleKit, we have a lot of example classes. So for example, container here that we're using, it prevents the block it applies to from consuming all the available space. And basically the way we use it here is we're asking all the visual elements to have the container class, which will restrict the space they use to the center. Basically here we're not using the space here, and that's what container does. So you can take a look at the style kit if you want to apply some styling that we have by default. This part of the doc also covers how to change the colors, the color theme of your application, which can be useful. So this is what container does. Here we're creating another part with another class name, which is card. Card is the thing that allows you to have this white box that contains a bunch of visual elements. Can be very useful to just divide your application in multiple parts. tgb.layout, very useful. This allows you to have columns with different visual elements. So here what I'm doing is I'm doing tgb.layout columns equals 1 to 1. What that means is I want a first column that takes 1/4 of the available space. A second column, so this, which will take 2/4 of the available space, which is this one. And the third column that takes 1/4 of the available space, which is this one. When you divide these visual elements, you should always put them into parts. So here I put the first column, all the elements of the first column, these two date selectors, I put them into a part to make sure that these are in the first column. I put the category selectors using a second part, so I make sure that they're in the second column. And lastly, I put the button in the third part to make sure it's in the third column. So that's layout. Another thing, here I put tgb.part and I use text center as a class name. That's a CSS class to make sure that elements in the part are centered, and that's how I center the apply button. Another thing of styling, here I'm creating class name. The first thing I'm applying is plain. So plain is something that we have by default for the button. So if I look at the docs for the button, you'll find styling, and you'll find plain, which is the class we're applying. Plain, everything it does is just makes the button orange in this use case. This is true for a lot of our visual elements. So you can take a look at each one of the visual elements. Angel will have a section on styling, which provides a few default classes. And the second class name we're applying is apply button, which this time it's a custom class. So when you're creating main.py, you can also create a main.css. And Taipy will read from this style sheet, and you can create your own classes. So here I created a class apply button, which just applies a margin to make sure that we're aligning this apply button. So basically the class is creating this orange margin to make sure that apply is aligned with the rest of the app. And maybe one last thing here, I create the visual elements in Taipy have a default class. So for example, if I take a look at this button here, here it says that it has the class Taipy button, which is a class that we have by default. If you want to change all of the buttons, the styling of all of the buttons in Taipy, you can just refer to that class and add properties here. So here I added width equals 60% to make sure that this doesn't take all the space. It just takes 60% of the available space. And that is it. So I gave a fair warning. This part for Python devs in general is very tough because there's a lot of ways you can style something, and also we use CSS, which is, but hey, at some point we gotta suffer. I mean, now it's 10 to midnight, so yeah. So there's a lot I covered here. So there's parts to divide your application and to apply styling to a lot of visual elements at one time. There's layouts to subdivide into columns. And then there's, if you want to apply a specific style to visual elements, we have default styles like plain to color the button in orange. You can create your own class and then create it in CSS. And you can also edit the CSS of many visual elements at the time if you pick up their class name and add things to it. And let's just code this, right? Let's just code this. Let's do main2.py. And I'm also gonna do a main2.css. And let's get into it. So we're gonna be creating basically this page. Let's not bother with the backend part. Let's just do the CSS stuff right now. I mean, the styling stuff. So from taipy.gui, import GUI, and then import Taipy GUI builder. We're gonna directly create a page as page. Let's keep that in mind. So I'm just gonna keep this application here so it gives us a reference. The first thing I did is a title. So let's just do that. tgb.text sales by state. Mode equals markdown. GUI page.run. Let's just run this to make sure everything is working fine. Sales by state. Let's do dark mode equals false. There we go. Sales by state. You'll notice there's a small difference between those two, so we're gonna start working. The first thing, state is in orange. This is not important, but there's a cool trick if you want to quickly apply colors to your text. You can put this in bold. So double star is how we put things in bold in Markdown. And in the CSS, you can add this. This is just CSS tricks. This changes any text that's in bold. We'll keep them in bold, but we'll change the color to color primary, which is the primary color of the style kit in Taipy, which is orange. This is just a trick. No need to really learn this, but it can be useful to quickly color text. Next up. So the first thing we wanted to do is create a container. So we create a part with class name container, and this will allow us to have all the visual elements contained within margins instead of taking the whole space on the page. So there we go, now it's in the middle. Next up, let's take a look at our reference. We want to add a card, which is going to contain our first visual elements. So with tgb.part, class name card, we're going to do tgb.text. Let's do from date. And let's just do that for now. There we go. From date isn't recognized because I didn't put mode equals markdown, but that's fine. And the next thing I want to do is create a layout, because this is going to be a layout with 3 columns. So let's create the layout with tgb.layout, columns 1, 2, 1. Actually, let's just do 1, 1, 1 for now. We create 3 columns. And once again, each column needs to have its parts to make sure that they're separated. They're separating visual elements. So the first one, we'll just put some text, column 1, with tgb.part, column 2 with tgb.part, column 3. And let's take a look. So you'll notice this created a layout with 3 columns, 1, 2, 3. And also something else that you can notice is if I change this to 2, so I'm asking the middle column to take more space. And this gives more space to the second column. So that's how you create layouts in an application. And now we're going to be able to fill these. Maybe something else. If I put class name equals text center here, we're going to be asking Taipy to center all the elements in the third column. And now the text in the third column is centered in the available space. There we go. I'm pretty tired. tgb.text. So the first part, nvapp, the first column will have, oh, I deleted my, okay, the first column has dates, date selectors, 2 date selectors, actually. So we're gonna add this. From date, oh, come on. From date. And we'll do tgb.date, start date. So this creates a date selector. Once again, you can take a look at tgb.date in the docs if you want to see examples on how to use this. And we'll also do tgb.text to tgb.dates and dates. So this creates 2 date selectors that we'll use to filter our data on. There we go, date selectors. it throws a lot of errors because we haven't initialized the variables, which really doesn't matter. Right now, we're just doing the styling. Next up, I'm gonna need these texts and two selectors as well to select these. So let's do that right now. tgb.text. Copilot just writes stuff for me. That's actually pretty cool. Yeah, that's pretty cool. This is bad, and this is bad as well. So not that cool actually. We're once again using a selector, so now I shouldn't need to repeat myself on this part, but selector takes in the value and a list of values. Product subcategory, and this time we'll put another selector, but subcategories won't be directly the Python variable, it'll be the Python variable in quotes and brackets, because remember this list of values, the second one, is supposed to change according to which category is there. So if I change a category, I want to change this list of values. So this needs to be dynamic, which is why I use this syntax. Pretty cool. If I run this application, I'm gonna run into a quick problem. Also, category is not defined, so let's just categories equals, yeah, let's just do this, whatever. The quick difference you'll find is this is not the same selector here as here. I mean, this is a drop-down one, this is a default one. So once again, you can look at the docs. We have a bunch of properties for each one of these visual elements. Here, the property we're looking for is drop-down equals true, drop-down equals true. There we go. The last thing I want is just a button, tgb.button, apply changes, apply changes. Let's just run this. Should have used reloader for this part. You'll notice, yeah, actually, let's do that right here. Use reloader. True. True. Oh my god. Okay. There we go. You'll notice that this button is not at the spot I want it to be, and also it's not the same color. So let's do things one by one. The first thing is color, so I do class name equals plain, which is a default style that's Taipy gives you, and you can find it in the docs for button. If I just reload this, I didn't save. There we go, it painted it orange, pretty cool. The next thing is I want to move this down to here. So generally when I edit CSS, when it's very deep CSS instead of just changing colors or whatever, I just go to this element here. I used inspect in Chrome. And you can add the CSS style that you want here to make sure that it's what you want. So for example, here I can adjust where I want this to be. Here, this value is pretty cool, so I can just save this and I'll copy paste it inside my CSS. So here we're gonna create another class. So dot Taipy, no, actually dot apply button. And yeah, we're just gonna do margin top equals 158 pixels. And here in the class name, we'll just add the apply button class. And if we refresh this, well, yeah, it was already applied because I applied it through the inspector. But here we get our apply changes at the right spot, which is what we needed. Maybe something else. Well, that's it. I don't know why I didn't have to use this. Maybe because the text is bigger. Let's actually kill this just in case it's reading. Let me refresh. No, it seems fine. Okay, whatever. Here I'll do apply instead of apply changes. Oh yeah, that's better. So this apply button is a bit too small. I want to make it larger. So here, instead of, this is just to show you all the different ways of styling. Instead of applying width equals 60% directly here to make it bigger, I'm gonna apply it to Taipy button, which is the class for all Taipy buttons in my page. Here I only have one. Taipy button, I think that's the right name, right? Yes. Width 60%. So just to make sure that we agree on this part, let me refresh. So it applied it to this one. Just to be clear on how all this works, if I create another button which doesn't have all these classes, yeah, like this. So reset doesn't have apply button, so it doesn't have a 158 pixel margin. But since reset is also a Taipy button, the Taipy button class gets applied to it as well, and that's why the width is at 60%. If instead of doing what I did, I put this property here directly, actually I don't put it here and I only put it here, so I remove this basically. Now the width property is only applied to the apply button because it comes from this class and not from the Taipy button class. So I'll just keep it like this just to show you all the different ways of doing styling. But yeah, this is pretty redundant. And there we go. It took us a lot of time, but we now have the layout that we wanted for our filters. So next up, I want to add a chart. Hello, yeah. tgb.chart data equals chart data. Same thing as before, which is state, sales, bar, layout. We're basically redoing the same thing as before, and the table as well, data equals data. And actually, you can reuse the code that we did here with all these variables. We'll just copy paste this, so a lot of our variables are initialized. So this is the previous part. You can just copy paste the previous part onto this. So we have a lot of initialized variables that still hold. PD is not defined just because I don't have pandas. Import pandas as PD. Oh, it killed everything. Why did it kill everything? Because I didn't close the layout. Instead of putting everything here, I'll just put the new visual elements outside of the card instead of putting them with the layouts. Let's do this. And I can just reload the page actually. And yeah, this makes more sense already. I think I have one indent too much. Yeah, so here I'm putting the chart and the data outside of the card part because I just, here I'm outside of the card part because I'm one indent lower. We'll just add some space here between the card and the chart and the data. So this is just using tgb.html.br. And I'll put this here as well. Reload. Oh, why? Let me just rerun this. And there we go. We get our filters, our chart, and our data. Pretty cool. And now the last thing we need to code is the behavior for all these elements. This, I mean, we've done the worst part right now. We did all the styling stuff. I know it, let's be honest, it's pretty bad, but this allows us to actually make applications that look somewhat good. That's why it's so important to learn this part. The thing I want to do now is the behavior. So the things we didn't code is this list of value, these two date ranges, and the behavior for this apply button. This apply button should apply the changes to the chart and the data. So let's do that right now. We've initialized two variables here, start date and end date. So we should probably give them some values. Start date equals this and date. So the data goes from 2015 to 2018. That's why I'm using these dates. So now they're initialized, and actually that's good enough. The next thing I want to do is this part, which is, let's go back on the main app. When I change the category, I want to change the list of values here. So if we switch category, I want a different list of values. The way I do this is I go to the category selector. I create a callback, which is change category. And I'll just code in this behavior. So def change category. Yeah, this is pretty cool actually, I think. So what I do here is when someone changes a category, I want to sort the data according to the selected category. And I take the unique values for the subcategory column, which will be the possible values for subcategory. I convert this to list, and I replace the subcategory's list of values here with what I just generated. Also, I've said it before, but teaching is about repeating stuff. The list of values will be dynamic, so that's why we have the quotes brackets syntax instead of just inputting the variable as is. And then also I change state selected subcategory to make sure that when I change the category, something is already selected and this doesn't appear just blank. So there we go. Actually, we can test this behavior right now. And it's going to crash, of course, because it's a tech demo. Also, I'll remove the reloader now that we're not doing styling. Oh, of course, nothing works. Okay. Actually, this might be fine. It's just I have a million terminals that were open. If I just rerun this like this. Yeah, we missed a few things. We didn't initialize selected subcategory, and we didn't initialize subcategories as well, so this can't work. Selected subcategory, let's do bookcases because we're in furniture. And subcategories will just do the same operation, just to initialize the subcategories list. And this should give us better results. Office supplies, technology, there we go, this works. So now we have a list of values for furniture. If we switch to office supplies, it gives us a list of values for office supplies, and then also automatically selected the first one. And we're not done. There's one more thing we need to do is code the behavior for the apply button. So tgb.button on action. Yeah, on change is for when you're connected to a variable, you want to detect a change in the variable. On action for buttons or things that are similar. Here on action, I'll create a function called just apply changes, pretty cool. Def apply changes. So I wanted, Copilot's probably gonna save my life. Actually, let's do this step by step. It might be a bit more complicated. we're gonna, when we press apply changes, we want to filter by date, we want to filter by category and subcategory. And then we want to change chart data, we want to change the title as well, and the data here. So a lot of stuff to do. Let's do it step by step. So state.data equals data. And here we're going to start by filtering by dates. There we go. So we make sure to take the start date, take the end dates, and compare them with the order date, which is present in the table here. And also where we make sure that they're on the same format. So start date uses this format, so that's why I specify the format here. And also convert to datetime here and here to make sure that they're the same type. And here we're gonna sort by category and by subcategory. Makes sense. And the next thing I want to do is, so this should be enough for the table because the table uses data. Now I want to regenerate the chart data. So this is the same thing as we did in the last part. It's this operation. And I also want to change the title of the chart to something more relevant, like sales by state for category, subcategory. And this should be good. We're actually a bit closer. So here, if I modify this, I'll put this to 2018. I'll put this to office supplies, storage, apply. It changes the chart, it changes the title here, and it changes this to only 2018 data, and it changes this to the right category and subcategory. It's been 1 hour and 5 minutes. I know, this is pretty long, but I gotta keep pushing. So this is actually a pretty cool checkpoint. We're actually not that far. Let's go back to the full application. There's only a few things I want to add right now. I want to add this map because it looks cool. I want to add a second page. This is pretty easy. The login stuff, I'll just touch on it. Because it's not available in the open source edition. So, and I'll also touch on deployment. Deployment is available. The thing about deployment is Taipy, where we deploy on whatever infrastructure that you have. So I have AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, on-premise. So I'll just show you quickly how I deploy on Azure. If you want to deploy on whatever you have, you just go to our docs, go to deployments, and there's a tutorial on how to do this. So we're almost done. The last thing I want to do is just add this map, add multi-page, well, a few touches, and I sleep. So the next thing I want to do is charts. The goal here is to show you how to embed any chart that you do. Here we'll use Plotly as an example, but it's this works as well for other Python plotting library and also JavaScript ones like I think Folium. So if you go to my repo in charts, I have created a chart.py script which has this function, generate map, which takes as input data like the one we have here. And, oh, come on. And which returns a Plotly figure, which is this one. So I'm not going to code this part because it's not Taipy, it's Plotly stuff. And basically you can code any Plotly figure that you want. It's just a map that I created that just displays the data of sales by state. And you can also, there's the, I don't know, the 2 letters of the state here, and you can hover on them and you get the state and the sales. Pretty cool script. And we're gonna just use it as is, so you can directly use the one here. I don't need this actually. To embed a Plotly figure in Taipy, it's extremely simple. The only thing you have to do is create the figure somewhere, Here I stored it in mapfig, a Python variable, and all I have to do is tgb.chart figure equals mapfig, and I'll get my map embedded in my Taipy app. So we're going to do that right now. We're going to start off from... Actually, what I'm going to do is we'll keep editing the script that we just did, the one on styling, and I'll just add the chart that I just showed. So the goal here is just to add a chart here, add the map here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to import the function I created in chart.py. So from chart import generic map, very simple. I'll create a variable called mapfig, which just generates the plotly figure. So if we look at generate map, at the end we return the plotly fig. And all I have to do now is we're going to create a layout just so we have the table, the bar chart on one side and the map on the other side. So with layout, come on, columns 1 1 tgb.chart. We separate columns with parts, tgb.part. And we create another column, and this one will have our chart. So tgb.chart figure equals mapfig, which is the plotly figure. And if we do this, please, we get our map figure on our app. So this is maybe a bit more fun than the last part. It's really easy to embed whatever plots you have in Taipy, and they're interactive. We can even catch events that you do in Plotly. So pretty fun. One last thing. Right now this doesn't work with the filter because we didn't do anything for that. So all we're going to do is we're going to go to the apply changes callback, and we're just going to regenerate the figure. So we do state.mapfig equals generic map with the filter data instead. And if we run this, let's do 2018 only. Let's do technology, I don't know, copiers, apply. And since we took such a small data set, now there's only a few states that have copier sales in 2018, and it's these ones. And you can see that Washington is buying the most copiers. But if I switch to bookcases, California buys the most bookcases for supermarkets. Pretty cool stuff, I think. So, at least. And there we go. That's it for the charts. Pretty easy. We have a few more things to touch on. The things we have is multi-page. So if you want to create a bigger application with more pages, I'm going to show you how to do this right now. Yeah, let's do that right now. So here what we did is we created a menu. Menu, once again, is something that you'll find in our docs in visual elements. Menu. There we go. There's a lot of ways to navigate between pages, and it's highlighted in our tutorials. If you look at multi-page, we show the menu approach, but also nav bars. So yeah. We'll just take a look at the code here. Before, when we created pages, applications, we only did GUI page equal page. When you have a multi-page application, like the one here, where I have a sales page and an account page here, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to do pages with an S, equals pages, and pages needs to be a dictionary, which takes in as key the URLs. So for example, page 1 is the actual URL of the page 1. On my deployed application, if I go to page 1, it goes to page 1, the sales page. And the values are the actual pages. So for example, page 2 is a page with some visual elements. Bear in mind the root page will be displayed everywhere, and that's why the menu that we create is displayed on both pages, even though they're not, the menu is not declared in page 1 and page 2. We only have to declare it once in the root page. So do pages like this with the 3 pages, and now all I have to do is define the 3 pages. So page 1 is the one we just created. Page 2 is just going to be a text on a button. And the root page is going to be the menu, which is this. It takes as input a label, which is just some text displayed at the top here. And then a list of values. The list of values, the first elements need to be the URLs of the pages. And then the second one is a class called icon. You can import this in Taipy, which takes in as first element the path to an image. These images, icons that I put here, and these images, you'll find them right here. So you can use them directly. And also a name. So next to the image, you get a name. Pretty simple stuff. And yeah, that's it. And that's how you do create a menu element. One last thing is we create a callback to actually navigate between the pages. So we do onAction, and we do this callback. And this is going to do something very simple. We're going to get the name of the page using the callback signature. This specific signature you can find in the docs. So if I do Taipy docs, I go to menu, I go to the callback onAction. It's going to tell me that it's going to tell me the signature of this callback with a description of the payload. And here we can see that using the payload, I can bring the name of the page, like so. And then I can use navigate, which is again a default function in Python, in Taipy, which allows me to just navigate to another page in the Taipy application. So onAction, when I click on something somewhere in the menu, it's going to trigger this callback, which is going to take the name of the page, which is this, and then navigate to it. And that's how we get navigation between pages in Taipy. Let's code this part. This will be the last part that I'll code, and then I'll touch on authentication and deployment, and we'll be done. I'll be able to finally sleep. So how do I want to do this? We're still gonna use the same scripts as we did before. Just copy paste the images that are in multi-page, so I have access to my icons. And I think that's all I need, yeah. So right now we're back onto this. If I run this, we're back on our single page application, and we want to make this multi-page. So the first thing I do is, instead of page, I do pages, and I'm going to create a dictionary with all of my pages. The keys are the URLs. So the first one is the root page, which will be displayed everywhere. The second one is page 1, which is going to be the sales page. And then page 2, which is going to be the account management page. I can already rename this to page 1 because it's going to be our page 1. I'll quickly create page 2. tgb.text, account. Let's do this in bold so I can get the orange color. And let's put a header as well, so it's a title. Mode equals markdown. tgb.button. This will be the logout button. We won't code this in the session, but let's just put it here. Class name plain. There we go. That's fine, I think. That's fine. So that's our page 2. And now we need to create a menu. So I'm going to create with tgb.page as root page, tgb.menu. Menu takes in first a label, so the name at the top left, so menu. And then tgb.menu takes a list of variables, a list of values. I think it's a list of tuples, if I'm correct. Let's go back to the syntax. Yeah, it's a list of tuples. The first element is the first element is a page key, the page URL here, so page 1. The second element is an icon, so icon is something we need to import in Taipy. Icon. An icon takes in 2 keys. The first one is the path to an image, and the second one is the name of the page that will be displayed. The syntax is bad. Why is it bad? Boom, page 1, page 2. I'll do this first, and this, and this. There we go. We can actually launch this first and see the issues that we have. This is our page 1, which is fine. If we navigate to page 2, first we might want to reduce the width of this. The reason the width is so big is because we applied Taipy button, so 60% is also applied to this button as well. So instead I'm gonna do this. So I'm applying this width property to only the apply button and not this logout button. And let's see what that does. Page 2. Yeah, it's a bit small. I can make it a bit bigger. Logout button. Width 30%. Let's do that instead. Oh, actually, that might be a good way to introduce overrides. So I'm gonna apply width 30% to all of my buttons. But since I still want my apply button to be 60%, what I can do is this width will be applied to all the buttons, but for apply button, since I want this one to be used instead of this one, I can do important to override the styling of this one. So never CSS trick, that's important to know. If what I'm doing is not good practice, I'm a Python dev, so that's the level where I'm operating right now. And plus it doesn't even work, what the hell? Why doesn't it work? It's getting really late right now. This is supposedly supposed to work. This is a Taipy button. Yeah, it's not getting anything here, I think. Oh, this is not the right syntax. Yep, Taipy dash button instead of underscore. Ah, there we go. And 30% might be a bit too big, so let's do, I don't know, 10, 15. So bear in mind here, because we used important, it didn't use the Taipy button width. Instead, it used the apply button width because I set it as important, so it ignored this one. But if we look at the other button, yeah, this side's pretty good. And on this one, well, we used the width of the Taipy button. This is details, so whatever. A few questions I have is this icon wasn't applied. Why? It's because I'm not using the right path, so person.png. And maybe a quick thing that we can do is also resize these images so they fit better. So if I do 50 and 50 here, it doesn't look too good. Let's do 70. 70 is better. And I need to apply these to this wheel class, so MUI avatar image. So if I do in my CSS dot MUI, let me actually just copy paste this because I can't be bothered. Width 70%, height 70%. Okay, please. Now I get my icons, which are the right height. I get my menu that's working properly. It's not interactive right now, but we didn't create a callback yet. And I do have 2 pages that I can navigate through the URLs, but of course we want to navigate through the menu. The last thing we need to do is create a callback on action, change page, whatever. And I'm gonna create that function right here. Def change page, state. Here I'm gonna we're importing navigate, which allows us to switch between pages. And here, so change page is the callback of menu. If I look at the docs, Taipy docs, I go to menu, it's gonna show me that the onAction callback has this signature, state, ID, payload. So I can use this signature here, ID, payload. And we're just gonna print the signature of this function to check what it contains. So state, we don't need to print state. Actually, let's just print the payload. Print payload. So here, when we're gonna change the, when we're gonna click on the menu, it's gonna print the payload. So if I click on the account page, it gives me the payload, and what we need is page 2, because that's what we're gonna use to navigate. So we're gonna do page name equals payload args 0. And then I can just do navigate state page name, and this will navigate between pages. Oh, incredible. So now I have a multi-page application with my 2 pages. That's pretty fun. And that's it. That's actually it. So we did a lot right here. And we actually have an application that does what we wanted from the start. Maybe 2 more topics before I leave you. Damn, 1 hour 30. What the hell? 2 more topics. We're not going to code for this part because it's a bit more complicated. First, authentication. It's not a part I'm going to cover because this is something part of our enterprise license, so we haven't open sourced this part. But just so you make sure that, just so you know that it's something that exists, we do have authentication systems that connect to whatever user directory companies have. So generally, it's going to be Microsoft SSO, OAuth, LDAP. Generally, whatever authentication you're using, we can also create new features around these. For example, if you're authenticating using Django. And basically, this allows you to log in using your own credentials. So here I created 2 users. I created an admin user, which has an admin role, and this allows them to see the table. So just to show you that we can actually hide or control the access to widgets or to pages or to datasets using the system. Here I'm giving a very simple example where one user is an admin and he's able to see the table. But if I connect as myself, I'm not an admin. I don't see the table because I coded it this way. So just to show you that we have an authentication system to log in using your own directory and to hide or make elements visible or accessible on the application. The last thing I want to cover is deployment. So once again, I won't cover this part because it's highly dependent on your side, on the infrastructure you're using. We support anything you need, so Azure, Google Cloud, whatever, or even from a local machine. By the way, we do have a tutorial in our docs about deploying online from your local machine. If I go to deployment, deploying a top-like application, let's do Docker. I'll show you how to configure both Docker to actually run the application in container, and also how to configure Nginx, which will help you redirect your local port that's displaying this application to an online address. Just to give you an example, here what I did is I put all the files required for my app in a source folder. I created a Docker file, which just installs the requirement using Python, copies all the files here, and just runs the app on port 5000. I pushed all this code and this Docker file to Azure virtual machine. On this Azure virtual machine, I'm gonna connect to this. I just want to show you a bit how we deploy our demos, basically. So here I go, my password. There we go, I'm logged into my machine, and on this virtual machine, I installed Docker Nginx. I configured Nginx so it redirects the local 5000 port to the IP address, the public IP address, which my VM redirects to this specific URL. I built my Docker container here, so if we run sudo docker ps, you'll see that my container is running with my app. And also if I do curl localhost 5000, I'll see the HTML of the application that I'm running. And so yeah, Docker is running this application. Nginx is redirecting this to our public IP here. And Azure is redirecting this to this DNS, which I can access online, and that's how I get my application online. And everyone can access it and play around with it. So maybe not this specific application, but every single one of our demos that you'll find in our docs in gallery here, all of these ones are deployed using this specific method, using Azure and Nginx and Docker. And there we go. So that's all I wanted to show today. I hope it was somewhat digestible. I really wanted to share that around because I think it can be useful for some people. I think sharing around your data project using an actual web app is definitely a better way to interact with whatever work you did. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this. If you have any questions, also shoot them down in the comments. Don't hesitate. I'll be there to answer these. And also, well, if you need any help, just go to our website. We probably have a support link as here. You can also book a call when you request a demo on our website. It goes to me generally. And yeah, check out Taipy, check out what you can do with this tech. Thanks a lot for listening. I know it was a pretty long tutorial. I hope this was useful. And see you next time. Thanks.